All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. I know it's been a while of Stu and the Nun, and as you can see, I'm joined tonight by a past guest. So I'm very excited to have on again. He's been making all the rounds. He's been all over Fox, and I don't know probably MSNBC, CNN. I can't keep up, BBC, but he comes back to where it matters here on Stu and the Nun. I want to welcome back Cameron Hamilton, congressional candidate for Virginia 7. Hey, Cameron, how you doing?
Thank you for having me, brother.
Yes, absolutely. You've been out there just, I know, shaking hands and kissing babies and talking, really most importantly, talking to the people of Virginia 7. So you've been working on this for a while. You've had a big field of folks you've been going against. So I'm glad we were able to get you back on and kind of talk about where things are and how things are going.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me again. It's an absolute honor to talk with other like-minded patriots. So I'm Cameron Hamilton, running for U.S. Congress in Virginia 7. I'm running in an open seat in Virginia. Right now, it's held by Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. She's not seeking re-election. She's retiring, and she's blessing us with running for governor in 2025. So as a result of that, she's vacating at the end of her term. I am going through a Republican primary, and then the hopes is, Lord willing, we're going to win the primary. We're going to win it strongly, and then we're going to go on to the general election in November and bring a Republican back, a strong conservative Republican in the Virginia 7th. Campaign's going very well. We're picking up steam. We've raised good money, raised right now almost $500,000. So that's really astonishing. I've got some amazing endorsements, some really just incredible patriots that believe in me and that think that I could be, again, part of this new freshman class of Congress to help bring our congressional leadership and our legislature back to serving we the people. Live in Orange, Virginia with my family, my wife, my 3 beautiful children, family man, husband, father, Christian, all around. Other than that, pretty, maybe moderately decent guy.
Yeah. Well, you when we first talked to you, I think it was just starting to get going. There were people still jumping in the fray and deciding who was going to run. That's been going on for a while. I imagine the time has passed. Everyone who wanted to file and try to run it done. How is the field? Has it grown a lot? Has it started to shrink some? Have people started bowing out, or all the horses still in the race?
Yeah, great question. So there have been more names that got in the race. I can't remember what month it was that we actually spoke last, but it got up to 9 candidates. Now it's back down to 6 candidates. 3 of them have pulled out. Again, 3 amazing patriots, Shalik Tarpley. We had also Mr. Bill Moore, who's running in Virginia 8, as well as Mr. Jeff Sachs. 3 amazing patriots. They've all pulled out, and they've all publicly endorsed me, which is really astonishing. So we're building that coalition, that broad coalition, which is really remarkable. Right now it sits at 6, but there's great people in this race. I think 4 of them are really not as viable, to be very transparent with you. They're amazing and compelling people, but I just don't know if they're going to have the viability to really carry through to the primary. It's really a toss-up between myself and the other gentleman who represents a little bit more of the mainstream and more moderate element of the party. So we are running, and our primary date is June 18th. Early voting in Virginia starts about 5 or 6 weeks early, 45 days of early voting, which is just absurd. But that being said, so we'll start on May 3rd, I believe is the first day of early voting. And then the primary will actually conclude on June 18th. And then we'll see the results. And Lord willing, I'll be running in the general election here in November.
Nice. The iPhone just did the old thumb up thing again. I love all these reactions. It does. You never know what's coming.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's chat about that for a second. You've had some people, like say, it went up to about 9, drop back down. How has that? That's just the Republican side. What's the Democrat side looking like? How many people are primarying over there? Do you know?
So right now on VPAP, they're only showing 6, but I believe that according to the FEC, they're showing additional as well. I think on the Democratic ticket, they're up to 9. I'm not exactly sure. So we'll see how that goes. But really, they're kind of backing a principal candidate who's looked at as the favorite. His name is Yevgeny Vindman. Vindman is the twin brother of
I know that
Vindman, who testified under oath against Trump for the Ukrainian phone call because he thought it preposterous that President Trump had an actual opinion on the Ukrainian foreign policy that differed from Americans in the previous administration. He thought it was preposterous. So he thought it would be prudent to be a whistleblower to target the former president. So Yevgeny Vindman is likely the front runner. He's raised about $2 million. He's got people like Adam Schiff, the actor Ben Stiller, and many others that are stomping for him publicly. So that's most likely who I'll face in November.
Wow, that's and yeah, he's because of his brother, he has gotten all that attention for sure. The leftists haven't got it. But let's talk about some of the folks that are supporting you, right? There's not there, there's some prominent names in there, not so much the media and Hollywood, but Tom Homan, which is former ICE director, former guest on here, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. We had Anna on before she won her race and became a congresswoman. So she was a great guest. We got a lot of awesome feedback on her. People just loved her. She's a firecracker.
She is.
I mean, you got Rand Paul, which is interesting too. Nick Freitas, obviously a local thing. Tom Massey, but I mean, let's talk about Rand Paul. Definitely a front runner, tier one name, and I hesitate to say the Republican side. I would just say the conservative side of the house, right? He's definitely more aligned with kind of how I even think of more of a conservative libertarian. How have you gotten his attention, Tom Massey's? I mean, how has that been to get some of those people to endorse you from that prominent in the conservative movement?
Well, I got to give a big shout out to Nick Freitas. For those of your viewers who don't know who Nick Freitas is my current state delegate. Nick Freitas is a former Green Beret. He then, ran in 2020 as the general election nominee for the Republican Party for this seat. He lost in the 2020 election to Abigail Spanberger. And so Nick is still my current state delegate. That's the equivalent of the state house. So he's representing me at the state level, and I'm hoping to represent him at the federal level. Nick was the one that approached me and asked me to run in the first place. I had a lot of other great patriots that were praying over my family and praying over me in this decision. But ultimately, Nick had asked very clearly if I would consider running. And really, I owe a lot of my help and a lot of the infrastructure that I've built around that, because he was the first person to fully invest in me publicly. Nick has been a huge supporter of Rand Paul. Again, Nick is sort of like the Rand Paul of Virginia, if you will. And so over time, I spoke with Rand Paul, I spoke with his team. I got to know them, again, some amazing patriots. And we talked about political philosophy. We talked about how we approach different matters of the law, what the role of the legislature is. Again, their big concern is the legislature is uniquely defined, and the legislature is not just another executive. And there's actually very few people that understand the distinctions between those in the public space. And all you see on the talking points on Fox News and many other news outlets, which is great and entertaining, but many times they're short snippets, but you don't really have an opportunity to get into the nuances of the law. Rand and his team spent a lot of time with me discussing it. And after a while, look, I'm incredibly honored that Rand would endorse me. It's a tremendous honor and a privilege. I've been a huge fan of his for a long time. I think what I appreciate most about Rand Paul, number one, his political jurisprudence, I completely agree with on virtually 99% of the topics. Number two, because he believes firmly in constitutional conservatism, restraint of federal power, and ultimately, principled conservatism with limitations of the executive. Now, in addition to that, Rand Paul has also been a very equal and fair broker to criticize the Republican Party when appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
I actually value that very highly. I think someone who's principled enough to stand resolute, even when your position is in contrast with the traditional Republican Party, that gets my attention quite a bit. And so Rand has never shied away from that. He's been very clear that his intent is to lead the party back into the premise and the principles of what it was founded on, not this new neoconservative edge that frankly is not serving the interests of the American people. And so for me, it was just a tremendous honor to get his endorsement. It took some time, but tremendous honor to get him on board and to believe in me.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention it, right? Because he is, he's all like all libertarians are, right? Big about the 10th Amendment and small government. Only what the Constitution says must be done, or that the states cannot do, and the federal government must. But the Republican Party definitely, since Donald Trump came on scene in 2016, or up to that campaign, up to that election year, has split in two, right? We've seen this, and sometimes I look at this and thinking even split in three.
Right.
But you have the established Republicans, which funny, some people would consider Rand Paul kind of falling into that category just because of the amount of time he's been in Congress, but he isn't by how they act and vote, right?
No.
So the McConnells, the Grahams, and all the rest of them, right? That the Bucks, if you would, and all who's now
Mhm.
leaving, quitting on his constituents like midterm, but these ones that have been around for a long time and just just making it a career like many on other sides do, and just kind of forget where they came from and giving things lip service. And then you have this, the younger up and coming, kind of part of the, what a lot of people refer to as the MAGA Republicans, right? The Tom Cottons, the Sarah Huckabee Sanders, even Kennedy, even though he's been around, but just these ones that aren't just going along to get along, but just, are more of what they refer to as the MAGA. Then you kind of have what seems to be this, to me, and you're much more smarter on this than I am, but it seems to be this smaller splinter group that's coming out, which kind of includes, in my opinion, the Rand Pauls of the world, which are maybe ones that have been around for a while that aren't the new young kids on the block, but still are trying to go back to what the Conservative Party was founded on and trying to get smaller government, quit trying to just, pay your way through everything, and all that kind of stuff, and trying to get back to controlling the debt. And some are even, there's like, hey, I'm only here for a couple, and they're only going to do a couple terms and they're going to get out. They're going back to those principles.
Yeah.
Do you see it in those three? I used to say just the two, but the third one I'm starting to see come about, and it seems to be a smaller group, but still
Yeah,
insane.
I think that's one way to describe it. I think you made a lot of accurate statements there. I would see really one group that was always there. We'll call them the classical liberal element of the Republican Party. Not progressive, not socially moderate, but classically liberal in their firm belief in the restraint of the executive and in the restraint of authority that was intruding into people's lives, the empowerment of the individual versus the state. And really, those are seen as like the first Republicans. When you look at the time of James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and many others, you had the Federalists and the Republicans. And so there was two very different perspectives: the belief that the states had a lot of elevation of autonomy and authority, and that state and local government should be superior to federal government on virtually everything, with
Right.
exception of the specific 17 enumerated responsibilities of the federal, this new federal government that was created back at that time. Rand Paul, Mike Lee, many others have been big vanguards of that. And then also ultimately Ron Paul, when he was a member of Congress out of Texas, many others have kind of held to this perspective uh, that has always kind of been evident within the party. And if you look back at the origins of what became the modern Republican Party back during the time of even Lincoln, the Republican Party was very split and very bifurcated over that end because Lincoln was not a limited government advocate. Lincoln was not a classical libertarian at all. In fact, quite the opposite. Lincoln was lambasted over the broad use and application of the executive in ways that, frankly, were unconstitutional. And so it created a big schism in the party then over people going, wait a second, we know that we have to win this war with the South, but we're granting powers or we're capitulating and really not restraining powers of the executive that one day will rule the roost and will not reap good consequences. So I would say that's one of the oldest elements of the party. It just has gone through some different flavors over the years. You even saw during the McCarthy era that everyone loves to criticize about, oh, see, this is when Republicans used government for their power. Yeah, McCarthy era was really not as terrible as people make it out to be. It was an exaggerated circumstance, but there were Republicans back in that day that actually believed that former Speaker McCarthy in the 50s during the Red Scare was usurping power in a way that was unconstitutional as well. So it's been present. It's been this underbelly of the Republican Party, which really should be seen as the classical liberal element, elevation of the individual and the autonomy versus the collective, versus the party, versus the population at whole. Then, in addition to that, you also have kind of the mainstream elements of the party, sort of that establishment ilk, the folks that go along to get along, that are willing to make deals and negotiations in such a way so as to really advance their agenda, but they're malleable with their principles. They're willing to negotiate in key areas. They're not really hawks on certain issues. Then from there, that's kind of always been present. But then, really, in the 90s, and you could even see this in the 80s as well, we had this neoconservative movement, this radical big government movement within the Republican Party that expanded federal powers, expanded federal agencies, took some of the infrastructure brought about during FDR, and then just made it even worse. And even you can ironically see some of the writings of Eisenhower talking about the concerns over the growth of the executive at that time after the Second World War and into the Korean War. This neoconservative movement eventually came out from it, and it's a huge advocate for aggressive American foreign policy, big advocate for robust military aid. The only difference between them and the Progressive Party that we find in the Democratic movement is really more nuanced when it comes to patriotism, more when it comes to the defense and support of our first responders, and a couple of key issues. But as far as what role they see the government playing, they believe firmly in a much more active and aggressive measure of federal government. And then after that, you have this new MAGA element that's arose. Really, it's more of an America. It's not so much MAGA; it's an America First agenda that's growing. It's young, it's energetic, it's incredibly active. You get people like Eli Crane, you get people like Anna Paulina Luna, many others that have been just super active and aggressive in trying to drive this message home about what it means to advocate for America First principles. You see a little bit of that with Chip Roy and others. So there's this kind of new, and not everyone within these cohorts perfectly line up on the issues. It's difficult. The only ones that are probably homogenous would be that first group I mentioned, the more classical liberal group that believes in restraint of government, like Thomas Massey, Amash, back when he was first in the House of Representatives before he kind of went a little crazy. And then you have Rand Paul, Ron Paul, and several others, Mike Lee. They've stayed pretty consistent, but most of these other groups have been a little bit more malleable. But this America First agenda is a new and compelling, energetic group. Where I would line up in all this demographic, I don't know if you're interested in knowing that,
Yes,
it's kind of a hybrid of that first classical liberal group, a lot of foundational libertarian principles. Things like the Patriot Act and others I see as a direct infringement on people's constitutional civil liberties that we should be advocating for. Things like the vaccine mandates within the military, 8,500 people kicked out for not complying with unconstitutional mandates. These are issues and topics like the 702 FISA extension. These are issues and topics that the more libertarian movement is advocating for. To restrain from the executive, then coupled with an aggressive America First policy, this kind of neo-populism. So I'm kind of a hybrid of those two, if you will. I favor more of the Rand Paul camp, but this new America First agenda, I'm completely in line with. So if that makes any sense.
No, it does, and it's you got to be careful, right? You don't want to put yourself in these are big, wide stovepipes of beliefs and thought, and like say, just because you may dip your toe into one a little bit doesn't mean you're all in, and you can someone can categorize you or anybody one way or another. I mean, there's some that are definitely you can look at and say they're all into that way of belief and that thought. But what
the America First brand really marries up well with the classical liberal brand, the more libertarian element is on fiscal issues. They're almost lockstep on virtually everything fiscally and pertaining to the southern border. And so that's where, again, that's the issue of our day right now. It's overwhelmingly popular, showing that Americans want a secure border. And so that's kind of why I think those two elements have really made a partnership. And frankly, it's very pragmatic. They're very much aligned with a lot of elements. And even Donald Trump to this day, he's making new partnerships with his political career right now that he didn't invest in as much before when he ran in 2016 and then eventually 2020. So Donald Trump is even partnering. He's much more of that America First agenda, neo-populism. He's making a lot of strong alliances with this classical liberal and more libertarian element of the party, which in my opinion is exactly where the party needs to go because it's an appropriate check on balance from the traditional order.
Yeah. Well, it kind of makes me think of, siblings fighting, right? Brothers may fight and not get along and hate each other, but somebody comes in from outside the family and they got each other's backs, right?
Yep.
So, even for the most part, I would say a lot in both parties are do that, right? They'll fight amongst themselves. The squad fights against the Pelosi's of the world, and the Gateses fight against McCarthy's. But
Yep.
if someone comes in from the outside, for the most part, they'll all go back to back and help each other out. But it doesn't mean they all tote the same line, and I wouldn't want
Right.
them to. That's been the
Right.
problem since 2008. Is Congress has pretty much foregone and forgot that it is the third branch of this government. I mean, through
Mhm.
the entire Obama years, for the most part, they just kowtowed to whatever he wanted, and no one would stand up and say, "I'm saying no," or "I'm saying a different decision," or "I'm going a different path on what I think is best for the country," or that my constituents wants. They walk the line. If they got the phone call, "You're going to vote this way," they vote that way.
Yep.
Um, I can't say you've seen that. I mean, you saw some of that in the Trump years, but not really, because let's be honest, when he ran, he was fighting the established Republicans as much as he was fighting the Democrats and the
Yes, he
media,
was.
right? So,
Yes, he was.
um,
And
so
that's where someone like Thomas Massey has actually identified a lot of that in a very unique way about some of the trends of the party and how many times the party is getting in its own way, and the Republican Party has created a lot more barriers to success than actual solutions for chief executives.
yeah, I mean, if you look at the one thing about the Democratic Party, for the most part, except for a little couple things here and there, if Schumer or Pelosi tells them to get in line, they get in line, right? They don't
Hmm.
even they don't even second guess. Where President Trump, when he was, I mean, he had a lot of pushback from the Republican base, and but maybe on not good for them, he doesn't forget, and which is why I think we see so many people resigning or planning to leave Congress
Yeah.
because I mean, if he wins, they thought it was bad before. I mean, he's not draining the swamp. I think he's lighting the whole thing on fire. I mean, what does he
Yeah,
care? I mean, he has nothing to lose.
that's
Um,
correct.
so it's going to be interesting to see. And he, like say, he has a mind like an elephant. He is not forgetting. I think and he has shown, unlike many other past presidents, who don't really fire people, no matter how they act or what they do, they just kind of move them around or hide them for a little bit. He has no problem firing people. I mean,
Hmm.
he went through how many different chief of staffs and different everything else. I mean, he was turning, but it was like, look, you're either on board or you're not. He wasn't just kicking the can down the road for someone else's problem. So it'll be, I mean, he is now the nominee, right? He is a Republican nominee, like Joe Biden is. What, first time in 56 years that they've had a rematch. Um, I got to imagine there are. We know there's a lot of people on the Democratic side on the left that are not happy that Joe Biden is the nominee. There are a lot of people that are trying to stay away from him.
Yep.
They don't want to that cringe thinking they have to go on some talk show and support him or endorse him. I imagine there's a fair amount on the Republican side that feel the same way about Donald Trump, that
Hmm.
they did not want him to be the candidate. Um, and probably are not looking forward to having to go on. But I think the chance of or Democrats stepping up and eating crow and supporting Biden is going to be higher than some. Some will just probably won't do it for Donald Trump. They probably will just not make the circuit, or they'll think they're going to get better attention by coming out against him. But that's not going to be
Yeah.
for their probably best interest, if he wins. So yeah, it'll interesting to see how this party splits. And I gotta imagine, like say, when he's gonna burn the
Yeah.
swamp, I feel he's gonna start with the Republican Party.
Oh yeah. Well, he's already doing that right now.
Yeah,
And
look what he did to RNC.
exactly. And to be honest, it needs to be done. Donald Trump or not, it doesn't. It needs to be done
Yeah,
because we have a lot of good conservatives that frankly go to DC and then they forget who they represent
yeah,
and they become part of the. This is an actual legitimate issue. I'm a veteran. I served as a Navy SEAL for 10 years. I've seen combat. Um, there's a lot of groups and organizations that are very principally conservative that have legitimate concerns over veterans coming to Congress because when they come there, they act like good little soldiers. We want to play on the team. We want to play by the team rules. We want to do what we can to advance the team focus and mission. The problem is when the team's going in the wrong direction, that's a huge issue because now you're going along with something that's not serving the American people. And
right,
that's where this kind of new America First genre or a cohort of legislators are totally unique because they have no problem pushing back against the party. They answer to we the people, specifically within their district. And I will say the unique thing about Trump now is I think he's much more in line with the American people now than he ever was in 2016 because he's seeing that and he's partnering with a lot of the right people. I think Trump was a businessman. I can't speak about Biden. I don't think he has any ethics whatsoever. I think he's in it to advance himself and his family, and he's going to try to corrupt and get as much money for his family before he retires, and they put him out to pasture. Who knows if they'll replace him at the last minute with someone else? If they had a brain, they would. But either way, we'll see. Nonetheless,
I think they're too far gone. I don't think they
yeah,
can.
you might be right. You might be
I think
right.
they needed to do that last year.
But when it comes to Trump, the issue at stake with him, he's making much. I can tell you from some of the things on the inside that I've seen, he's making much better partnerships this time than he was in 2016. Because the party has slowly come to realize, oh, shoot, this man brings a lot of energy here. We have to find a way to get on board with it and advance a common objective. Otherwise, we're going to get left in the dust. When he first ran in 2016, one of the funny things about it is we all remember what the Republican Party did. They pushed him aside and they put up someone like Mitt Romney to speak up at the RNC convention and bash Donald Trump for an hour at the nominating convention. I mean, how out of touch could you be? No one else was drawing tens of thousands of crowds, and Donald Trump's not perfect. There's no denying that. He's got a lot of flaws, like anyone does. But the fact is, the man was bringing energy and bringing a perspective into the party that needed to be heard, that the base was motivated on. The Republican Party should have seen it as a blessing and an opportunity, not something they had to work against. Even though, again, like, for example, the trade policy with China, I'm a firm free trade advocate. I did not agree with the president when he engaged in the trade and tariff wars with China. Now, those are legitimate things that we can discuss and disagree on. But right now, he is making stronger alliances, and I think he is brokering with some of the right people. But time will tell, because the party itself does need to be cleaned up, whether it's with him or not. The party needs to get cleaned up, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up. I mean, I've talked on the show a few times that, you know, what the politicians, both left and right, never paid attention to, and it started in 2008 with Obama, was that the American people wanted someone truly from the outside. Because I tell people, how does the everyday blue collar, everyday working person in a flyover state kind of thing feel so aligned and close to a billionaire who was born into that, who did not, you know, build it himself, raise himself up? I mean, this guy's got hotels and stuff all over the country. You know, it's got his name and everything's in gold. I mean, but the everyday working man and woman could associate with that more so than anyone else, because all they wanted was someone that talked like them, worked hard, and wasn't a politician. They missed it in 08. They missed it again in 12 when you know, when Obama, the American people gave him a second 4 years. After that, that's the reason why. But that's the reason why Bernie would have won the Democratic ticket had the DNC not sabotaged him. I mean, no, even though he was a senator already, he was much more outside the mainstream than Hillary was, and he would have won then and went against. It'd have been two guys, you know, that were considered outsiders, you know, even though one was truly out. Because the American people did not want another damn politician. Ron didn't have a chance. John McCain didn't have a chance because of that.
Yeah, 3 of the 4 candidates in that presidential election were unconventional, we'll put it that way. On the Democratic side, you had Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. One represents more of the establishment mainstream. The other did not at all.
Right.
On the Republican side, who did we have? We had, at the end of the day, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. Neither of those were conventional Republicans.
Right.
Neither of those were really much like anything that we had seen in quite a while in the Republican Party. Donald Trump won the nomination for the Republican Party, and yeah, it really was a battle between the establishment and something different. And there were a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters that spilled over because they knew how crooked Hillary was, they knew how corrupt her family was, and they thought they can't support this. Yeah, whatever. They'll support a businessman because at least he'll be pragmatic.
When it came out how the DNC sabotaged him, yes, a lot were very upset, and they were more upset with him when he endorsed her. When Bernie had to endorse her, you know, it was for sure. They felt like he sold out. You know,
well, it kind of did.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. Since we're talking about presidents, let's talk about the State of the Union the other night. You know, it was I you know, of course, just doing what I do. I tuned in, watched every bit. I was live tweeting off our Twitter account here for Stu and the Nunn as fast as I could type. But there was no shortage of things that they hit on. But what was your takeaway from that, of everything that happened, whether the yelling out, the patronizing the Supreme Court or the Republicans that he did, just, you know, or even Speaker Johnson's a best method to try to keep a poker face. Anything stood out from that State of the Union that you'd like to share?
Well, number one, that the Democratic Party is so much more radically to the left than where they were even just 4 years ago. It's really quite remarkable and astonishing to see how incredibly progressive that party has become. Number two, yeah, the president wasn't giving a State of the Union speech. He was giving a political victory speech, which is hilarious because he's completely out of touch with reality. He's talking about the great things of the economy and all these job numbers and X, Y, and Z. The man's on another planet. You literally could not have asked for somebody to be more out of touch than what he delivered. Number three, it was really astonishing to see a little bit into the eyes of Joe Biden, because the expansion of federal authorities that he's claiming to have and the manner in which he wants to weaponize the chief executive of our nation is remarkable. And Americans need to really pay attention to what's going on here, because he's claiming the authority and claiming the ability to impact a variety of different sectors that it's only going to take an act of Congress as well as the Supreme Court to restrain. I also thought Johnson's facial expressions were hilarious. The man doesn't have a poker face. He probably could never hold a straight face if playing Texas Hold'em. But either way, I don't think Speaker Johnson is a bad man. I think he has a lot of character. I think he's a man of faith. I do think he's getting some bad advice right now. But I pretty clearly we could see that he was uncomfortable, because the majority of the things that Joe Biden was saying was just, they were out of touch with reality. There's no way you could be coherent and hold on to that position, which shows you the cognitive dissonance that we find with a lot of the Democrats that were there, standing up, giving them ovations every 30, 40 seconds. It was, good grief, they're just a bunch of cheerleaders for the party. And that's what we have to really realize.
Well, it's interesting, right?
Yeah,
it's the State of the Union is the one speech a year that is really meant for the president, regardless of who it is, to wrap their arms around the entire country and say, this is where we are as a country, and this is what we're going to do, and here's how things are good and bad, and that kind of stuff. It was the complete opposite of that from all the State of the Unions I've ever watched, where that one night, he can shake hands on left and right, and maybe one side doesn't stand as much as the other side, but he talks about where we are as a country. And it was absolutely here's where the left is going, and here's why you're wrong. And, it's just, I mean, even the shoutings out and that stuff, when that happened, like the last State of the Union, maybe the last one or two, like when someone yelled out liar or whatever, everyone was just taken aback. Like now there was yelling and people acted like it was British Parliament. I mean, people weren't even batting an eye until Gold Star Father, yelled out, and because everyone heard say U.S. Marines and Abbey Gate, but no one paid. Marjorie Taylor Greene, people were like, yep, just like everyone acted like it was normal. I'm like, wow. And just the last couple years, that level of decorum, people are just like, there's no way we're going to have that anymore. And that is just thrown out the window. Not saying any of it wasn't warranted, justified or not, but still, it's the one time where there really shouldn't be anything said that would even cause someone to do that.
Right.
And that's the part that kind of got me, was just the yelling, the angry, and then just, when the Republicans would say something, his little snarky, oh, now you want to support that bill? It's like, dude, this isn't the time for that.
No,
it's not the country. It's the whole world watching.
Yep.
You're making a lot of promises, and half of them probably won't go anywhere, and they just sound good for that night. But at least you're giving people hope and like, okay, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it should be an opportunity to unite people. It should be an opportunity to explain the perspective of the chief executive and where the trajectory of this nation needs to go. And to be honest, he blew it. He just completely blew it. I don't know how to say it any differently than that. So it was a shame. And I was actually on Fox News that evening giving a rebuttal on Trace Gallagher. And they asked me, what do you think of the president's positions on Israel and this and that? And I made it very clear. Joe Biden has been wrong about American foreign policy for the past 4 decades.
Yeah.
Let's just take that in. And let's really, unequivocally,
almost 5 decades. You probably
undeniably, like, this man has been wrong time and time and time and time again. Even Secretary Gates under Obama admitted it. Joe Biden has no idea what he's talking about with foreign policy. And that's the man that we're empowering to be the chief executive of the strongest military. So I agree. It was purely a political stunt.
I mean, the American people didn't want him before. It's the reason why he lost every other chance trying to go out to be the president. And And I mean, I still say to this day, the only reason why Obama picked him as a vice president was an insurance policy, because he knew if he was his vice president, Obama was safe. Nobody was going to try to take him out or do anything else, because nobody wanted Joe there. And now Joe finds it, in my opinion, finds himself in the same spot. The reason why he picked Kamala, the first one that kicked out, is because he knows nobody will want her. So he say, trust me, if it was anyone else near competent, the 25th Amendment would have been pulled out and executed on a year ago. I mean,
Yeah,
absolutely. If it was, even if it was someone we don't, it could have been Booker, it could have been Johnson.
Yeah, she pulled awful in that presidential primary for her own party. I mean, she just pulled awful. I mean, talk about abysmal. She even made statements when she lost the primary for the Democratic Party saying that, well, the country's a little bit more racist and sexist than I thought it was. That's your party. That's not our party. That's your party.
Yeah.
And you're gonna make those accusations. It's no, you're just terrible. Like, I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you, but you completely lack self-awareness here.
And I think she's going to be a big part of his downfall, because the American people are looking at his age. They don't want her, and they're looking at his age, go, he probably won't make another forward. It's going to end up being her. And I think the people will either not show up to vote, right? They'll stay on the couch, or they're going to do what a lot of them did in 16, and they're going to go vote for the other side and just not tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you see it in the polling of all the minority polling numbers and everything else. I mean, it is, I mean, Donald Trump's got 50 Cent coming out supporting him. He's got, I think, Snoop Dogg now. He's got, I mean, it's just, he's got numbers coming in from all over. It is going to be, I saw a thing today that, that Joe Biden's popularity number, I think it's poll number, is 1 point off of what Jimmy Carter's was right before he lost a landslide to Reagan in 80. He's only 1 point off. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and Joe Biden's far less likable than Jimmy Carter too.
Yes. Yeah.
Jimmy Carter was a terrible president, but an incredibly likable guy.
Right. But
Joe
he
Biden is a terrible president and not a likable guy at all.
I think Donald Trump said this, President Trump said this a couple weeks ago, that, Jimmy Carter should love this, because now he's not considered the worst president in American history.
Oh yeah.
He's not the bottom, maybe 49th, but he's not the worst. But hey, let's talk about something that definitely is happening, and this is happening on Joe Biden's watch, and this is terrible. We're watching it in real time. Today we sent the after and I don't have his name handy, but after a congressman did his own rescue mission,
Corey Mills,
thank you, and pulled 10 Americans out of Haiti. Haiti that's been in turmoil for the last 18 months since their last president was thrown out. Today, maybe, I don't know if it's because of, Congressman Mills doing it or whatever, but, now we've sent Marines in there to look for Americans, which after, according to reports, they were contacting the State Department. State Department was just saying, keep hiding and good luck. Haiti's going to hell in the handbasket. I mean, the president can't even get back in to get his stuff so he can leave the country and be done with it. And now we're sending Marines in there to fight a number of gangs that have all joined up together. And it just, it's a complete chaos. It's like a mini Afghanistan of just nothing but gangs and rivals that are just terrorizing the people.
We need to think about American foreign policy too with Haiti. How much money did we send to that country during their rehabilitation areas? And even the Clinton Global Initiative, we sent billions of dollars into that nation, and it is so rich in natural resources. It should be an oasis for the people there, and it's not, because everyone's skimming off the top there. That is one of the most corrupt and unstable governments that the modern world has ever seen. It's effectively a failed state. I hate to say it, but it's true. It is effectively a failed state.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last reason why the last president was overthrown was he was so corrupt. His people know it. He had them completely impoverished and was living high in the hog, and they got rid of him and instilled this one. But this guy they put in, nobody wanted. And I mean, it's just, we sit back, and I go, part of it, I sit back and go, okay, this is, these are the times when, for the good of mankind, we should step in and do something. I get that. But, the reality is that, we can't even bring these people in because we have everyone else just coming over going, yeah, I don't like it in my country. I need asylum. And these people are, I mean, they are literally running for their lives and starving to death. And it's no different than, we're other places around the globe in our history where we've stepped in and put our military forces and our might in place to help save innocent human beings, even though we had nothing in stake for it except it was just the right thing to do. But I think we have just. I think I don't think the American people have an appetite for this, no matter how bad it is.
No, I don't think they do right now. And my absolute heart breaks when I think about the innocent people that are that are bearing consequence of what's going on there. The innocent people that will struggle and that will be harmed and that will lose their lives, their homes. My heart absolutely breaks. I'm a Christian man. Again, I don't want the shedding of innocent blood anywhere, under any circumstances. The question, though, is this a worthy enough cause? Because if we're going to send the U.S. military in, we have to consider the possibility that men and women who are Americans will bleed and die in that soil. And that's another question. Is this a worthy cause where we are literally willing to sacrifice the lives of the men and women that we have wearing our uniform to bring stability to this nation? I'm not saying that the answer is no. I'm saying a very high burden has to be met before we're willing to make that decision. And I agree with you. I don't think the American people are having anything with it right now. I think we're looking at this going, with all that we've invested in this country, with all that we've done with foreign aid and assistance to Haiti, what progress has been shown? The answer is it's more corrupt now than it's ever been.
Right.
Why would we even have an appetite to fix it? I do think the State Department has a particularly rough time because, on the one hand, look, evacuating America is an incredibly expensive affair. I do give them some credit there on that. It is incredibly expensive. Not only that, but American Citizen Services have very clear stipulations. So if you're a U.S. American, if you're an American citizen living abroad, you had better research what American Citizen Services are available to you and what the evacuation plan looks like, and make contact with people at the U.S. Embassy, because by living abroad, you are taking on some risk.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's a reality. And we have to make sure people understand that risk so they don't haphazardly, oh, I'm American, the U.S. is just going to come get me no matter what the circumstances is.
Right.
Maybe not, depending on the circumstances, depending on how extreme it is.
Look
Not
at
every nation
Afghanistan.
has the resources ours does.
Look at Afghanistan. I tell you, I mean, it's
Oh my gosh.
right. You are taking it on yourself. Even when I've traveled overseas and stuff, whether in the military or
Yeah.
working for the government or something like that, right? You go through all these briefings, you go through all this stuff, and you're told all this stuff you got to be ready for, right?
A friend of mine, Nick Check, was shot in the face in Afghanistan by rescuing a doctor that was warned by the State Department, do not go overseas, do not engage in this work. He got captured just like they told him he would. He was ransomed. They were going to kill him on lie and stream it on the internet. And again, the men over within the SEAL teams came out and rescued him. And a great American, amazing American patriot from Pennsylvania, literally was shot in the face because of this. And so it's just, at some point, you need Americans to realize it's a dangerous world out there. And now we have a robust system in the United States where our military does provide aid and support to American citizens who are stranded. And that's an amazing thing. And I always want that. But there is risk with living overseas. And people just need to be sincere and honest about that, so that we're aware of what the consequences might be. Because I don't want you to make a decision where you put other men and women in harm's way to accommodate your lifestyle because you just simply want to live there.
and think you bear no responsibility. And even if you're
Right.
going there for the best of reasons, my church does a lot of
Right.
stuff in Haiti, right? We do mission trips, we do all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't mean that the enemies of our country and the people out there, they share anything close to what your morals, values, and beliefs are.
Right.
They don't care why you're there. They don't care if you're helping their own family, right? If you can be a political pawn or help them get a message across or do something like that, they will just as soon cut your throat on live TV as take your handouts, right?
Yep.
And I think people need, like you say, they need not to think that they shed all responsibility for that and think, yeah, like say my daddy's coming to pick me up. That's not always going to be the case, right? Um,
Right.
but it is interesting to watch. This Haiti thing is not overnight. I know the media has just started covering it overnight, and you got this gang leader with this unique nickname for terrible reasons. But this has been going on since for the last 18 months, right? Since their last president was
Been
killed.
going on a lot longer than that.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot longer. But for the last 18 months since their last president was murdered, and they put this new one in place, it's just been a hellhole. And now of course, like anything, you get some news crews down there and everyone sees it for the first time. They act like
Mhm.
it just happened, but it is. It's yet one more hotspot on the world that this administration has to deal with,
Yep.
and they're having a hard time with the few that they have.
Absolutely.
Um, so another hot thing that's happened, and if you run for Congress, or no, if you win Congress and you get your seat up there representing Virginia 7, and you're up there, and things like this TikTok ban come across.
Mhm.
Very interesting. We talked about Rand Paul a second ago. He's against it, understandably. Why? Because he's very much against the government overreach and all that stuff, regardless of what the reason is.
Mhm.
But it passed the House pretty clearly. I mean, by a large majority, 300 something, I think, to 60 something. But what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we know TikTok's it. I have a lot of social media. I do not have any TikTok. I don't want that on any of my stuff. I know it's super
Yeah.
popular, but and they're doing commercials all the time of people acting like how TikTok helps their business and is good for them. But what are your thoughts on this? How would you approach that, or what do you think your decision would have been?
Yeah, I think Thomas Massey actually gives a really good response too. It is a difficult argument because I have, people that have endorsed me on both sides of the aisle of this issue, people that I've aligned with and that I agree with very much politically, who were very divided over this topic. I think virtually everyone agrees that TikTok should face significant limitations and restraint. I think the concern is that the authorities granted to the government were too broadly written and did not even narrowly apply to just TikTok. That's the concern that was presented. And I'll be very transparent with you. I have serious concerns as well over what authority we grant to the executive over an issue like TikTok. Now, let's look at what TikTok is, though. It's weaponizing kids for radical ideology. It's doing all kinds of stuff that's terrible. We have this cyclical, cycle of kids with their engagement and swiping, looking at more content. None of that's good. They're getting fed content through moderators of specific topics and genres that are not healthy and productive. Plus, the data behind TikTok is highly compromised. ByteDance, the parent company, members of the Chinese Communist Party are on the board. There are legitimate concerns over TikTok and its current management. I think if it divests from its Chinese ownership and ultimately becomes reformed here in the US, might be willing to take this up. Um, I'll be honest with you. I really don't know that there's a good answer on this because I would love to ban TikTok if it was just TikTok. I also know that who benefits from banning TikTok?
Facebook.
Facebook, Twitter, all
Yeah.
the other, I mean, all the other
Instagram. Yeah.
entities. Yeah, exactly. So,
And they're not that much better. I mean, just short of not being owned
no,
by the
well,
Chinese,
Twitter is
but
better, but
Twitter is better only because Musk spent
only because
$44
Elon
billion.
Musk invested in it. But Facebook, we
Right.
ban TikTok. Facebook stocks will go through the roof. Their control will rise. They'll have continued dominance in the public sphere on the public space with regards to dialogue. I have very serious concerns over that as well because
And they're not
Facebook
they're
has
not
not
ethical
been.
either. We saw
No,
what
they're
they
not
did in the
trustable
last
at all.
election. Right. Right.
So there's no easy solution. Um, there really is no easy solution. If it was a cleaner bill, I think I could have supported it. I think the way I read the language, though, it was just a little bit too broad for my liking. And ironically, Matt Gaetz gave a really good defense over if a couple sections of this bill were cleaned up, he would have supported it. And I'm hoping this does not turn into another incident like the Patriot Act. When the Patriot Act was voted on, there were very few Americans that opposed it. And sure enough, what did we find? Over time, we found they were absolutely right. The
Right.
abuses that were engaged in by the chief executive of this nation under really both parties was abhorrent. And so that's my concern here. So it's in politics, I wish it was an easy yes or no. This one's really complicated
Yeah.
because of the issues that are legitimately surrounding scrutiny of TikTok that should be scrutinized.
Well, you
At the
brought that
same
up
time,
earlier, right? You mentioned earlier at the start of this that, if you look back at our history, whether it was, the attacks on 9/11, again, I've talked about to people about before. I'm like, imagine if, we tried to pass the Patriot Act and stuff like that in 2000. Like they would have came out in droves, like, going against anyone that tried to push that. But after 9/11, obviously, we were feeling the pain. We were hurt. We do whatever. We went right along with it. And then I look at March, April of 2020, and I go, the things that we let the government do, or that we
oh
did
my
at
gosh.
the request of the government, because we thought, holy crap,
It's a
we're all going to
pandemic.
die. It's a pandemic, even though they weren't burning bodies, so it wasn't a real pandemic. That's what me and
Correct.
my buddies always say. But I mean, we all went along, right? All of us, 2 weeks, keep the grandma safe, flatten the curve. Okay, we'll do it. We'll shut down everything. We'll let the government shut down. We'll shut all that stuff. And we just gave the government all this freedom and rights to be able to dictate all this stuff, change the definition of what a virus is,
Yeah.
and change, that kind of stuff. And then, but you look back at earlier times that when things have happened in our country, probably, if you look back at when JFK was assassinated, you look back at after we were attacked in World War II, look at we allowed them to round up Japanese and put them in internment camps. No one batted an eye, right? Um,
A
so
Democrat, FDR, interned American citizens of Japanese descent in
right.
camps. I mean, you could not make this up.
We let another Democrat, Barack Obama, drone a U.S. citizen overseas and kill him with no due process. Right?
Many U.S.
Right.
citizens, but that
Many.
was just the most famous one. Yep,
Right.
you're totally spot on.
I mean, we've allowed it to happen, but like you say, it never gets peeled back, right? We do it in a moment of panic and emergency and just that kind of like, oh, we got to do something. Okay, that's cool. Let this happen. It's for the betterment of the country. But then no one ever rolls that back and say, oh, let's get back to how it was. They just take that and build on it, right? How many executive orders or how many things have happened where the administration, no matter what it is, keeps just adding on and say, well, there's been precedent set. They've done it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Supreme Court told Biden he couldn't do the bailout of college loans. He did it and bragged about it and said, you can't stop me.
Yeah.
There's
yeah,
no
then, yeah. When the courts rebuked him, he did it again. Exactly.
right. And the Congress doesn't to collectively.
And he's still talking about it to this
right.
day.
I mean, he bragged about getting the Ukraine prosecutor fired in Ukraine over the six. He talked about that.
Yep.
But the Supreme Court, unless someone brings something to them, they can't take action. Congress can take action, but
correct.
You have members of Congress by far that just don't want to hold and do not recognize they are equal to that same branch. They are equal to collectively. They are a peer to the executive branch.
And it's really funny you mentioned that, because that is something so astonishing about many people that I find running for public office is they don't actually understand the role of the legislature. They talk about these kitchen table issues and they run on which are great issues and they're important, but the solutions they bring are under the auspice that the legislature has executive powers. It doesn't at all. And so it's really astonishing. A friend of mine, Mark Green, again, he impeached Mayorkas because he legitimately perceived it as, we don't have enforcement authorities when it comes to the southern border. We do have authority, however, on political appointees. And so he leveraged the authorities granted to Congress explicitly and got him impeached, even though many Republicans said it was a distraction and a waste of time. Prime example, he actually used the Solicitor General's arguments in Texas v. Biden to argue with why the Secretary of DHS legitimately should be impeached. That's what we need. We need people to actually understand the legislature. And it's so astonishing because we have legislators who are our representatives, who many of which, who if they had an opportunity, they would be little tyrants. They would want to weaponize their authority and in fact engage in executive action, which is astonishing and should frighten every American. With that also, we see the case of EPA versus West Virginia. West Virginia came back to the EPA, who is a regulatory agency. This was won in the Supreme Court, but West Virginia came and ultimately said, you do not have the authority that you're claiming over our state sovereignty. These are legitimate constitutional issues, and we need people who understand the limitations of the role of government so that they can address the concerns of today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you hit on that. And especially when they're using those previous things. Hey, I know my browser, I know I'm locked up. It does every once in a while. You're still good. But if I drop off for a second, I'll be back. You'll just be on the show by yourself, Cameron.
I do that.
So, but I'm seeing it do what it does before, and I don't know why my browser does it. I'm looking at myself in another feed. So, until I drop off, I'll just keep talking. I just won't be moving. And we only have a couple minutes left. So, oh, there we go. Okay. So,
well, hello, everyone. It's just you and me. Remember, stay patriotic. Don't give up the fight. We've got a country to save. We've got to get this party back on track before we ever have a chance to actually save this country. If we want to take on the political left, we got to fix this party first. We got to bring back the blessings of principled conservatism.
There we go. I'm back. I'm glad
Awesome.
it's happened enough where I knew I
was trying to give your listeners a pep talk, man.
That's it. That's good. Hey, I do want to talk. I know you're, former Navy SEAL and awesome on that, but obviously we care about all of our services and all our military, but the West Point U.S. Military Army Academy, phenomenal academy, beautiful campus, and as is Annapolis, but duty, honor, country. I mean, that's you hear that and you think of Patton, right? You think of just all these great generals that have come through West Point, Army generals, and the latest commandant has now struck that from their, I guess, charter or mantra or whatever they call it, but has removed it and said just Army values and replaced it with Army values versus duty, honor, country. Where do you think that's coming from? Is one of those words bad? Is one of them not considered politically correct for some class of people, or what?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, all three of those words triggered me, just to be very clear. So I want to make sure all your listeners understand. But I think right now we are facing a scenario where many in our military leadership are not accountable. We've created an entire class of high-ranking military officers that are really politicians. All they care about is inspections, evaluations, and making sure that their career looks unblemished. And then who can out diversity each other, who can out, quota each other on the issues. And it has nothing to do with military readiness. It has nothing to do with celebrating the great diversity of the armed forces and why it empowers the military to be more effective. It's all about class warfare and quotas to pursue and promulgate this politically progressive agenda to influence our military. It's really a shame. So I think the military academy is making a profound mistake with this decision. We'll see what they come up with, if they even come up with something different. I think the sentiments is that they might come up with a new motto. Some people are saying, no, there's not going to be a motto. We'll see what really unfolds. But I think there are so many in our military leadership that need to be fired.
I mean, did this start with a renaming of Army bases?
No, it happened long before that too. We've seen for a while this kind of zero defect mentality with military leaders, and it's been growing at an astonishing rate. I just think we need to bring back actual warriors. Our generals should be and admirals should be consummate warriors. They're not.
When I was contracting the Army, I was at a TRADOC. General Dempsey was the TRADOC commander at the time. And I was at this conference where, the 1-stars were like E4s. They were everywhere. So many generals there. And I was there as a civilian contractor. And he said something in one of his sessions that, there's things I liked about General Dempsey and I didn't. But he said, we need to stop, rewarding people for not making a mistake and start rewarding people for taking a chance and maybe making a mistake. And I thought that was very profound. He was just like, he was talking about the zero defect tolerance. Zero tolerance was just so prevalent through the military then that we were rewarding the wrong people. Yeah. People need to take chances, but hey, we need
innovators.
We got to cut. Thank you so much, Cameron, for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me. And thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Everyone have a great night.